The smell hit next, dry, dusty, but over it something sharp and sour. Web. Her fingers brushed a strand across the wall. It clung to her skin, vibrating faintly. Something had felt her touch. From ahead came a low, rasping sound, like silk being pulled across stone. And then, in the darkness, two clusters of eyes opened, each one the size of her fist, reflecting the faintest light from somewhere far above. They hadn't escaped the swarm. They had walked straight into a second nest. Chapter 8. The Hollow Spine. The darkness swallowed them whole. Emily's breath hitched as she felt the walls close in, the web strands brushing cold and sticky against her arms like living fingers. Darren was just ahead, his footsteps muffled, the scrape of his boots lost in the chorus of clicks and skitters all around. Ahead, the cliff's tunnel split again, narrower, steeper, a vertical maze carved into rock and silk. A faint glimmer of moonlight bled down from cracks high above, outlining impossible bridges of web stretched thin between sheer walls. They had no choice but to climb. The first step was a plunge upward on slick strands, hands grasping with desperate grip, legs straining against the vertical walls. The web creaked ominously beneath their weight, stretching and sagging like it might snap at any moment. Emily's fingers bled where silk bit into her skin. Every movement met with tiny vibrations, hundreds of legs tapping somewhere just out of sight. Below, the hollow chasm yawned, endless and dark. A skittering noise sped down the tunnel behind them. Darren froze. They're close. Emily swallowed hard. Keep moving. They climbed faster, following the fragile bridge as it twisted higher and higher, the cliff walls closing in like a coffin. From the shadows, pairs of eyes appeared, dozens blinking into life, watching, waiting. One large spider dropped from above, landing with a soft thud on the web just ahead. It raised its legs, fangs glistening. Emily slammed the pry bar into its head. The creature twitched violently, then went still. But the web around them vibrated wildly, a signal, a call. The chase was on. Spiders poured out of cracks and crevices, swarming over every inch of web and rock. Emily and Darren scrambled, muscles burning, heart pounding in their ears. The web bridges cracked, strands snapping under the weight of both hunter and hunted. Darren lost his footing, falling toward the abyss, but Emily grabbed his arm, hauling him back with every ounce of strength left. "Don't stop," she gasped. The climb became a frantic scramble. The moonlight was fading as dawn threatened on the horizon. Somewhere above, a faint wind whispered through the cliffs, a promise of open air. Emily pushed her body past exhaustion, reaching for the final ledge, dragging Darren with her. They spilled out onto jagged rock, gasping under the pale light. The swarm stopped at the edge, their glossy eyes flashing in the dark, unwilling to follow. For now, they had won. Emily sank to the ground, trembling, her gaze fixed on the horizon. But the desert was still vast, and the hunt was far from over. Chapter 9. The Long Silence. The desert stretched out like a blank wound, endless and merciless under the growing light. Emily's knees hit the rough ground with a dull thud as she sank down, breath shallow, heart still hammering. Darren collapsed beside her, rubbing a raw patch on his shoulder where the web had shredded his skin. "We made it out," he said, voice hoarse, but the words felt fragile, like a whispered prayer. Emily's eyes stayed on the horizon, where the sun climbed higher, blazing down without mercy. The vast emptiness swallowed sound, save for the harsh whisper of the wind and the soft, distant echo of the swarm beneath the earth. Days passed. They moved slowly, conserving water, rationing the last of their food. Each night, the desert grew colder, the sky pinpricked with stars that felt too distant to comfort. Emily's dreams were haunted, visions of a nest, the boy's pale face twisted in fear, the swarm's ceaseless legs skittering just beneath the soil. Darren grew quieter, the tight jokes and steady resolve replaced by exhaustion and doubt. The weight of silence pressed in on them, thicker than the dust. Emily caught herself watching shadows a little too long, jumping at every skitter or whisper. The fear wasn't just outside, it was inside, clawing at her sanity. One evening, as they huddled beneath a rocky overhang, Emily traced the old scars on her arms where the venom had seeped in. The swelling was gone, but a burning throb remained, a reminder that the nest had marked her. "We can't stop searching for him," she said quietly. Darren nodded, swallowing hard. "But every step takes us deeper. The swarm is endless out here." Emily's gaze fell to the cracked earth beneath them, imagining the countless eyes watching, waiting below. "We survive," she whispered. "Then we fight." The desert was a cage, and the hunt was far from over. Chapter 10, Blood and Silk. The night was sharp and cold, the sky a slab of glittering stars stretched thin across black velvet. Emily crouched behind a ridge of cracked sandstone, her breath clouding in the cool air. Beside her, Darren checked the makeshift rig, lengths of wire and baited nooses strung tight between jagged rocks, woven with strips of cloth soaked in their dwindling water. The plan was simple: lure the swarm to the surface, trap as many as possible, then burn the nest from above ground. Emily's fingers trembled as she loaded the last of the insecticide into the spray canister. The chemical smell was sharp, burning her throat, but it was their best weapon. "We don't have much time," Darren muttered, eyes scanning the shadows. "They'll come for us before dawn." She nodded. "We make them pay for every step." The earth trembled faintly beneath them, a warning that sent adrenaline flooding through her veins. The swarm was near. Somewhere below, the ground shifted and bubbled like a dark tide. Suddenly, the first spider burst through a patch of loose soil, legs clicking sharply against stone. It snarled, a sound like wire tearing. Then another, then dozens. Emily and Darren stood, hearts pounding, as the swarm flooded the trap, legs tangling in the wires, bodies thrashing against the cloth snares. Emily sprayed. The insecticide hissed, thick smoke rising as the spiders writhed, their bodies twitching violently. Darren struck matches, lighting piles of dry brush set around the edges. Flames roared to life, licking the rocks, consuming the trapped swarm. The heat was intense, burning away the silk webs and driving a scream of rage through the nest below. Emily felt the sting of smoke in her eyes, but kept moving, spraying every inch of the trap. When the last ember died, the desert fell eerily silent. They stood, shaken but alive, watching the dawn break over a scorched wasteland. But Emily knew the swarm was not finished. They never were. Chapter 11, The Whispering Web. The fire had burned the surface nest to ash, but beneath the earth, the swarm was waking. Emily and Darren's nights grew restless. Shadows seemed to flicker at the edge of their vision. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was watching. Then it began, the whispers. Not voices, but the faint, almost imperceptible rustling of silk threads vibrating in the wind, as if the very rocks breathed with a million tiny legs. One night, Emily woke to a crawling sensation on her skin. She tore off her jacket, only to find dozens of tiny, baby spiders woven into the fabric, their eyes glinting like pinpricks of black. "Darren," she whispered, heart pounding. He came running, only to find the same weaving spiderlings already in his hair, crawling under his sleeves. They tried to burn the clothes, but the spiders reappeared elsewhere, inside their pack, in the food, even embedded in the soil beneath their makeshift camp. Emily realized the swarm had learned, adapted. Their fire had only driven the creatures deeper, closer, smarter. They were no longer just being hunted. They were being stalked by a living web of terror. The boy was still out there somewhere, caught in the endless silk. And Emily knew, if they didn't find him soon, the desert would claim them too. Chapter 12, The Last Thread. The desert night was suffocatingly silent, but Emily's skin prickled with 1,000 invisible eyes. The air around their camp shimmered with tension, each breath heavy with dust and dread. Darren lay unconscious nearby, a deep gash bleeding from his forehead where a trap had failed. Emily's hands trembled as she gripped the makeshift spear, fashioned from shattered metal and sharpened wood, her last weapon. She had followed the faintest trail of disturbed earth deeper into the cliffs, where the nest's pulse was strongest. The boy's faint cries echoed through the hollow tunnels, a thin thread pulling her forward. The tunnels twisted tighter, walls slick with venom and silk. The boy's voice grew weaker, more distant but still alive, trapped but alive. Then the swarm attacked. Thousands of legs surged from every shadow, filling the air with the sick, wet sound of chittering mandibles and tearing silk. Emily slashed and stabbed, burning through webs with frantic bursts of insecticide. Each breath burned her lungs, her vision blurred with sweat and blood. Ahead, the boy lay wrapped in silk, pale, trembling, eyes wide with terror. She tore him free, but the swarm closed in. Darren stirred, joining the fight, together pushing toward the narrow opening they had come through. The final climb was agony, spider bodies crushed beneath their boots, silk snapping, hearts pounding like war drums. They burst into the dawn light, collapsing on the sun-baked earth, the desert stretching endless before them. Behind them, the nest was silent. Emily looked at the boy, cradling him close. He was alive, but forever marked. She knew the desert would always watch, always wait. And somewhere beneath the earth, the swarm would rise again. But for now, they had one.